He'll tell us about the actual studies that he did in his protocols and the results that he found. All this and more can be found in his book, DMT, The Spirit Molecule, and the Radio Bookstore has it. I'm Laura Lee. Let's continue our conversation with Rick Strassman. He's the author of DMT, The Spirit Molecule, a doctor's revolutionary research into the biology of near-death and mystical experiences. The Radio Bookstore has this at 800-243-1438 or radiobookstore.com. And Rick, before we hear about the protocols and use of your DMT experiments, I just have to quickly ask you, since we're on the topic of heroin and coca leaves, when Dr. Balabanova found traces of nicotine in those Egyptian mummies, my first reaction was, well, of course they were chewing coca leaves because that's what they would do. They weren't distilling heroin. So to say traces of heroin found in the tissue and hair of mummies, I think is misleading. I think they were just bringing over boatloads, because I do believe in diffusionism, of coca leaves and chewing those for their mystical, experiments that they were doing.
They could have been, and they may have been smoking opium. They may have been smoking opium poppies as well, which contains morphine and heroin-like substances too.
Oh, and are poppies found in the old world and the new world as well?
They're found in the old world primarily.
So maybe they wouldn't have had to import that. They could have used poppies for that.
Well, if it was a morphine or a kind of heroin-like substance, that would have come pretty easily from poppies. If it was cocaine, it would have come from coca leaves, which may have been imported from South America.
Right, but the chewing of coca leaves would have shown those traces in the hair, or would they have had to have figured out how to distill heroin from coca leaves and shoot them up,
No, I think if you just were, if you were drinking coca leaf tea, there'd be enough cocaine in there to be deposited in hair or nail or skin tissue, or even bone probably.
Good. So you're the first person that really had the definitive answer to that question.
Well, sure.
In biochemistry, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
Now let's get back to your research with DMT. Tell us about once you got the permission, and who did the permission come from, the DEA? And
well, it took quite a while to find a manufacturer of the DMT that would meet the requirements of the government for purity and sterility. I finally ended up being able to use a colleague who made the DMT as a friend named David Nichols at Purdue University in Indiana. And he agreed to make me a clinical batch of DMT, which met all the requirements of the FDA for the cost of materials, which was an extraordinarily reasonable cost. It took a long time to find someone that would agree to make the DMT at a reasonable price. I found a lab within the government that would make the DMT, but the cost they quoted me for making it according to government regulations and doing all the paperwork would have been around $50,000. And as it was, the cost of Dr. Nichols making it was $300. So I certainly had $300.
It's like those hammers, those $700 hammer markups, isn't it?
It's like a $50,000 hammer. Yeah.
What is it made of anyway? Where do you go to get the raw materials to compound this together?
Well, it isn't that complicated a chemical to make, but the problem is obtaining the precursors or the ingredients. The ingredients are carefully watched by the DEA too. And so if you were interested in ordering the precursors or the ingredients to make DMT, you'd be getting a call from the DEA wondering what was going on. So actually in terms of making the drug, it's just a handful of ingredients, but it's quite hard to get one's hands on those ingredients.
Is it a liquid, a powder? What form does it eventually come in, and how did you...
Well, the first amount of DMT which I received was in powder form. It was about 5 grams of powder, and we dissolved it up into sterile salt water, and we were interested in approximating the effect of the smoked drug. It's smoked on the street, and since my funding came from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, I was interested in seeing if injecting the drug in some form would approximate the effects of the smoked drug. If it's smoked on the street, it starts quite quickly within beats or so, and it peaks in about 5 or 10 minutes, and then it's over in about a half hour or so. And so our first volunteer, the first volunteer received an intramuscular injection of the drug. It was a drug which had been studied actually in the first wave of psychedelic research. In all of those previous studies, when they injected it, it was given as an intramuscular injection. And so I started off with our first volunteer giving it as an intramuscular injection. But it was a lot slower given through a muscle as compared to the smoked effect. And so actually we ended up switching to giving it through the vein, which is even a little quicker than the effects of the drug when it's smoked. It occurs, the effects begin to manifest within maybe 2 or 3 heartbeats, and they peak within about between 90 seconds and 2 minutes, and then people start coming down at around 4 or 5 minutes, and they're completely normal within maybe 25 minutes or so.
How did you design your protocol? Did you figure out what people were doing on the street and say, well, it sounds like that I'll modify that, I mean, in terms of how much and...
Well, sure. Well, it was kind of a roundabout way of figuring out what kind of dose to give. We started off with the intramuscular injection of the quantities which people had given previously in the first wave of studies in the 50s and 60s. And then when it seemed like that was too slow an onset, then we started giving it through a vein, and we reduced the amount by a factor of 2 or so, and then just started increasing it from there. The first couple of volunteers, when we were giving it intravenously, the effects were strong, but not quite what I was looking for.
What were you looking for?
Well, I was interested in the effect that people were describing with the full dose of smoked DMT.
And what were some of those reports?
Well, they're pretty remarkable. Other than the immediacy of the onset, there's an incredibly powerful. I guess the best way to describe it is to describe it as a rush. It's just this overwhelming feeling of energy building up in the body and in the mind, which actually can't be contained, and it's as if consciousness kind of bursts out of one's body, because the intensity of the rush is so great as to almost not be containable within the everyday, kind of vessel of our lives, of our bodies.
Sounding transcendent already.
It's pretty transcendent, and as a result of the experience, just not being able to be contained within one's body, people quickly and almost uniformly experienced an out-of-body experience. There was a pretty profound and clear-cut separation of consciousness from the body. And so where did the consciousness go? Well, it went into this very colorful realm. It's extremely visual. It kind of starts off with a kaleidoscopic kind of display of colors. And for some people, the visual imagery sort of stopped at just a kaleidoscopic visual display. But those colors were the most intense and saturated and colorful that